Thanks, Catherine, and thank you everyone for joining. I know quite a few of you, but some of you I've not seen before, so hello. And I'll just introduce myself. My name's Andy Stevenson. Most importantly, I'm dad to Beth on the right, and Amber, who is actually my stepdaughter, but I don't think of her as that. And they're my inspiration for continuing fundraising. The reason Reverse Rett exists and everything else that goes on. And now, after all these years of doing this job and working for the charity, all the other people that I've met who have Rett syndrome over the years. So my fundraising started 1999 with the London Marathon. I'd never done any fundraising before. Sadly, my brother's son died, and it's a pretty awful time. He died of cot death at just a day old. And after about 6 months, I felt as though I couldn't do anything to help my brother and his family. So when he asked me to do the London Marathon, I said, yeah, having no idea of what to do. I'd never run more than 5 miles in my life. So I was panicking about the training and everything else. But I was mainly panicking about the fact that FSID, as they were called then, had I think it was £1,200 minimum sponsorship, which 25 years ago was a huge amount. It's still a huge amount now, but back then it was even more, and I had no clue about how I was going to raise it. So as soon as I'd signed up, I thought, I'm going to have to start doing this quite early on. So I had the paper form that nobody uses anymore. But by the way, I think is still the best way to fundraise, because when you have a form in your hand and a pen and you put it in front of somebody, no one can refuse it, or very few people can refuse it. So it is still a great way to fundraise. Anyway, at the time, I was working at a golf club. There was a golf professional, so I had a shop, and I just put the form on the counter, and people would come in to, pay the green fees or get the cards for the competitions, and they'd say, "Oh, what's this?" And I'd explain it, and they'd stick a tenner down, and I think I raised in the end about just over £2,000, which I was really, really pleased with. And it was quite straightforward, to be honest, but only because I was in that situation where I had people coming in every day, and working with the general public made it quite easy to raise the money. So that was my sort of introduction. After that, I did another fundraiser for FSID in 2001, and then in 2002, my daughter was diagnosed with Rett syndrome, and everything changed. So the first thing I did when she was diagnosed with Rett syndrome was try and find somewhere that I could raise money and send it to research, because that to me was the only way forward. As the parents who are here know, the news, when you get the news that your child has Rett syndrome, is so devastating, and you look into it and you don't see many positives. Back then there was zero positives. It was awful. I wasn't even on the internet and had to research it in the local library. So I looked around and tried to find somewhere I could raise money and send it to research. And other than that, I stuck my head in the sand about the whole thing. Unfortunately, there wasn't anywhere to send it. So I raised money firstly for Rett UK, but they weren't sending money to research at the time, and so I looked somewhere else and ended up fundraising for Beth's school, for some equipment, which that took 3 or 4 years before I got round to doing that, because the school seemed to really need the money. Then I found out that the money I'd raised was sitting in a bank account and not being used. So that was the end of that. So then I raised some money for an all-terrain chair to take Beth, wheelchair to take her up mountains and things like that. And it cost a ridiculous amount of money. And within about 6 months of that, because of a situation with a scoliosis, the chair wasn't even usable for her because it didn't have the support she needed. So again, I went back to scratch and thought, what can I do that's going to make a difference? And it was around that time, so it was 2007, that the reversal experiment happened in Edinburgh that we all heard about as parents. So I thought, right, well, something's going to be happening now. It's all going to, this could all be over in a few years. Little did I know. And quite soon after that, I discovered RSRT in the States. So that was, they were funding scientists, and that's all I ever wanted to do. All I ever wanted to do was fund people cleverer than me in labs who were going to make a difference for Beth. So I started to fundraise for RSRT, and the issue there was when you say to people in the UK that you're fundraising for a charity in the USA, they aren't that forthcoming. But despite that, I did raise, probably around 5,000 to 10,000 for RSRT, and that was when the founder of RSRT, Monica Coonrads, contacted me and asked me about setting up Reverse Rett. And that's how we started, basically. 5 parents in the UK who wanted to make a difference and started a charity, not knowing how it was going to go. So just going back to the fundraising for a minute. By this time, 2008, that's when I joined Facebook. And suddenly fundraising was probably even easier. I had the best of both worlds. So I still had the sponsor form, different sponsor forms that never left the counter of the shop. People were really supportive. They would forget they'd donate half the time. And when I reminded them, they'd just say, "Oh, just see it as a direct debit, monthly direct debit," which was great. So that was good. And then there was a whole new world opened up with social media. And to begin with, I wasn't very good at it. And it took me a while to get to grips with it. But that's just me with technology, I think. So as the years went on, I got a little bit better. And as the charity grew and it was decided that they needed someone to come on board as a fundraising type of person, the trustees asked me. At that point, there was only Rachel on her own. So after a lot of thinking and wondering whether I should give up my golf career, I realized that this was something I wanted to do for Beth, and I joined Reverse Rett full time. Now, as far as my fundraising went then, I had to completely change how I was doing it, because suddenly I was working in a little office in Manchester with one other person, and I didn't see anyone, basically. So the sponsor forms were obsolete as far as I was concerned. So I had to think about what I was going to do next to raise money, to keep things moving along, and also to keep my sanity, because fundraising is one of the things that I've always done to cope with the fact that my daughter and now 2 daughters have this condition. So social media, I was getting better at. I was learning slowly how to be honest and tell people about the story, about Rett syndrome, about how it affected Beth and what the hopes were for the future. At this point, it was all, the global research program through RSRT. That was all we were doing. We were raising money and sending it to scientists. And, it was, there's so many things with this condition that you can share. It wasn't hard once I'd got into the hang of it, of, sharing different symptoms and, different things that was happening. So after a while of not being in the golf shop, I did have a period of time where I was thinking, can I really ask people again? How long can you keep doing this? Are people going to get fed up of me? Am I going to alienate everyone? And I probably did alienate some people and still do. But the mindset is the key. Your mental strength is the key to continually fundraising. I had quite a lot of messages from people that I hadn't seen for years from school and things like that. And they were like, thank you for sharing Beth and sharing Beth's story. And we've watched her for the last few years and we've seen her grow up and everything else. And what you're doing is great. And I realized that Beth was actually inspiring people to give. And why should I take that away from people? Because when you think about it, when you've got a child with Rett syndrome, there's not many people around that can help you. Beth was never had babysitters or anything like that because people were scared. She had complex needs, you know, seizures, things like that. People were terrified. No one ever offered to babysit for her. Nobody could really help with anything. I'm sure there are other parents here that have experienced this where people feel a bit useless, even family members. So giving them the opportunity to sponsor you to do something is in some ways, in fact, in a lot of ways, a blessing for them because there's nothing else they can do. So that is how I framed it in my mind. They love Beth. They've seen her grow. They've seen her grow up. They can see what the future holds for people with Rett syndrome. It's looking positive. You know, it's been reversed. Why wouldn't it be cured? You know, other diseases have. So that was how I framed it in my mind. And then if I ever did get a doubt, once I'd set up a new Just Giving page or I had a new challenge on the go, if I ever did have a doubt that I was bugging people, I'd spend a few minutes with Beth and then, you know, with Amber and see what they go through. And, you know, people talk a lot about fundraising fatigue, and I do get it. But what about Rett syndrome fatigue? These girls, these children are living with this condition that absolutely ravages them. And they do it day in, day out. And a lot of the time they do it in a very good natured way. And they are inspirational with how they cope with what they've got. Because it's important to remember that it's actually, you know, as much as it affects all our lives, it's them that are living with it. So I just feel that we have a duty to do whatever it takes to take some of that away from them and to give them some kind of hope. So so that's what happened. I realized that I'll tell you a story about when I was in the golf club. Would have been about 2005, and one of the members who had donated on a regular basis and who I played golf with, he knew about Beth. He came in one day very, very excited, and he said, I've just been reading a newspaper article about the goalkeeper at Man United, and he's got the same condition as Beth. And I went, what do you mean? And he went, yeah, he's got the same condition as Beth. He's got Tourette syndrome. And I just went, I had to laugh and let him down gently because he was so excited about this. But it made me realize that, you know, we all talk today about how people don't read and how they've got a really bad attention span and everything else. Well, that was my first real experience of that, of how little people actually take in. So the point I'm trying to make here is a lot of people worry about repeating themselves and saying the same things over and over again. The chances are that people won't have read properly anyway. So you're not boring. And I'm going to talk a little bit about social media in a little while. And how repeat posts and things like that on social media isn't a waste of time and isn't boring and isn't annoying people, because basically a lot of them won't have seen the first time or the second time, and the third time they might have read half of it. So repeating things, repeating the message is key to a lot of this stuff. The other thing that's only hit me in the last few years regarding your own fundraising and continually doing it is, we as parents and uncles, aunties, friends, whatever, doing something that's not easy to raise money for a child with a condition that's on the cusp of something life-changing happening, especially with the news this week with the gene therapy trials. That's actually inspiring to people. People are inspired by you. So where your mind says to you, oh God, I'm going to have to ask again, reframe it and think, I'm giving people the opportunity to do something amazing and be part of, the first neurological disorder to be cured. And that's how you can approach it. You can just think, people want to give. If people didn't want to give, I wouldn't have raised the money that I've raised over the years. And the same people that were sponsoring me 20 years ago wouldn't still be sponsoring me today. So there's some of the things that you've got to do with your mind, rather than thinking that you're bothering people and bugging people. I've touched on mental health. For me personally, I need to do it for myself and for the children with Rett syndrome and the people with Rett syndrome. It helps me. It really does help me to have a challenge to think about, an event to think about, and I can't see myself ever not feeling like that. When we did first start, I had a period where I couldn't understand why people would just ignore me. And it did bother me for a while. There were so many amazing people doing things, sponsoring me, doing things themselves. But again, down to mindset, I would think, well, why hasn't that person done something? And why hasn't that person? I'm really close to them. Why aren't they interested? And in some cases, I'm talking about family members. And I spoke to a good friend about it because I was feeling quite down. And he basically said, when you set up something like this, you come to a crossroads in your life with the people that you know in it. And you can look left and you see good people who want to help you and be there with you. And you look right and you see people who aren't interested. Just keep looking left. And that has stuck with me for 14 years of reverse Rett. That wasn't exactly what he said. He did use an expletive for the people on the right, but I'm not going to repeat that here, especially as it's being recorded. So that was a quote that really helped me. And it's something that I keep in mind whenever I set up a new Just Giving page and start pushing it on social media and on email and everything else, which I've just done this week, by the way. I've just set up another one earlier this week, which I haven't shared yet, but it's coming soon. So moving on, social media and how to make the most of your fundraising, because this is where most people fundraise these days. So obviously there's a lot of pages out there. There's a lot of people doing amazing things, and you've got to find a way to make yours stand out. So one of the things that I did a few years ago, I went on a social media training course with a guy that is quite close to Manchester in Altrincham, Alex, and it was a real revelation to me to find out how social media works, specifically Facebook for me, because that's the best place to fundraise. But Alex explained that when you post, probably about 15 to 18% of people will see it on your friends list. And you've got to try and imagine how you use social media. You don't spend your day clicking on people that you know and looking at their page. You go onto your news feed and you scroll through it, liking things and ignoring other things. And that's how people use Facebook. They just scroll. So first of all, when you put your first post out, you're not going to get that many people seeing it. So you've got to put it out more than once, in the hope that by the 4th or 5th time, someone will have seen it. The other reason for doing this is people will see that you've got a page and that you're doing something, and they'll want to donate. Then they'll forget. How many times have you done it? I've done it so many times. And in fact, just saying this now, I can think of someone who's doing something and I haven't donated yet. So I need to remember to do that. So you're giving someone a reminder by sharing it again. If they see it again, they'll go, oh yeah, I meant to do that last week. Then they might forget again, or they might do it. So don't be afraid of sharing. Try to make your posts interesting. Try to make them different. The most important thing, another thing I learned with Alex, you've got to use a picture that engages people. Now, the best picture to use is a close-up face. You know, I use Beth and Amber a lot. I use their photos a lot. I'm not shy about sharing them. It's not always been that way, but now I'm not, because it's the only way to really make an impact for me. But not everyone's the same. So you just need to be a little bit creative with how you lay it out for people to read. The worst thing you can do, and this is another thing he told me, was just share links, because links are taking you away from Facebook. Now, the algorithms of Facebook do not want you to go away from Facebook. They want you to stay on there. So by sharing a link, it alerts a bot somewhere who makes sure that that post isn't very visible and not many people see it. So put a picture on, put some wording. Never ever share a link without wording. You know, if you look back through your pages, if you're on social media, look at how much reaction you've got and engagement you've got on posts that you've put out, which is just a link. I can guarantee you're lucky to get 5 likes on them. So you've got to use a picture. You've got to use some text that engages people. And that's really, really important to make sure that people are motivated to give to whatever it is you're doing, or to get involved in an event you're holding, or to take on their own fundraising challenge. Now, this slide is, I just want to talk a little bit about something that comes up a lot with me, you know, in the day-to-day life of what I do at Reverse Rett. Lots of people are afraid to start fundraising. I don't blame them. I was afraid when I first did it, for all the reasons that I've already mentioned. But how you've got to look at it is this, and again, we come back to mindset. It's not about the amount that you raise. If you raise 50 quid, that's fantastic. If you raise 500 quid, that's fantastic. If you raise 5 grand, that's fantastic too. It's all brilliant. Whatever it is that you do, it's brilliant. And 80% of the money, and not many people know this, 80% of the money that Reverse Rett has raised and sent to research, which is over £7 million, has been raised by people doing what they can. Families, their friends and connections. That's who's done it. And it's a small amount. Believe me, it's a small amount, considering how many people are affected by Rett syndrome in the UK. So all that money and much more since we've started funding the Rett Centre and all kinds of other things with the registry and stuff like that. It's all come from people doing what they can. So you've got your team challenges, like the picture on the left, where you get a parent and they pull together 4, 5, maybe more people, go and do a run, go and do a bike ride, hold a quiz night, whatever it is they do, and they raise a big amount. The picture on the left is a cake, and this was when I was at Mersey Valley, the last golf job that I had, and it was not long after Reverse Rett started in July of 2010. And this guy came in, who I got on with quite well, and he just had a cake in a box, and he said, "I've made this cake, and I want you to raffle it for Reverse Rett." And it made £50, the raffle tickets. And I just thought that was incredible. You know, the reason it's on this slide is because it still moves me now that someone just thought, what can I do to make some kind of difference? What skill do I have? And that was his skill. His skill was, because he was a bloody awful golfer, his skill was making cakes. And he just made me a cake. I didn't ask him to. I didn't ask him for anything. He just came in and gave it to me. And 50 quid later, there we were. So it's not about the amount. If it was about the amount, I don't think I would still be fundraising, because some of my earlier fundraisers, they raised over £10,000. Now, my fundraisers these days raise, if I do really well, maybe 3,000–4,000. So it's a way down on 10,000, but it honestly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you raise. I don't mind if I put this page out and I raise 150 quid, because it's 150 quid that we wouldn't have had if I hadn't done it. So again, mindset is key. Think about the overall, the big picture of what you're contributing to, and understand that Reverse Rett are where they are now because of teamwork. It's not been down to one person or even 10 people. It's been down to teamwork, people raising little bits here and there, and adding it all together makes a huge difference. But I did have a thought a few days ago when I was planning on doing this. We've got 12,321 Facebook followers. So if every one of them did a fundraiser and raised 50 quid a year, that would come to 616,000. That would pay for the SIP Rett Centre for almost 2 years. Now, it's blood, sweat and tears fundraising, getting the money for the SIP Centre. It's 338,000 a year. It's expensive. It's well worth the money, but it's hard to raise the money, very hard. But just think, if that was to happen, it never will. I know it's pie in the sky, but £50 a year. Who can't raise £50 a year? I would say no one. No one couldn't do that. You know, by selling some cakes at work, or you know, getting a stall and putting it outside your house and selling some old toys as people walk past. I honestly think anyone can raise £50 with a fundraiser. And look at the amount, look at the difference it makes. So if you're having doubts about whether you can raise enough because, you know, you see a family or a person with a bit of a higher profile raise 10, 15,000 from one fundraiser, and you think, oh, well, my money's not going to be worthwhile. Don't think that. Don't think that, because we can see from this graph that it is worth it. Whatever it is that you raise, it's worth it. And as I said, if I run the Manchester Marathon and I raise 150 quid, that'll do for me. Hopefully I won't. I would like to, after all the pain of running, which I hate, I'd like to raise more, but if I don't, I don't. And if you can, again, mindset, think about that. So these are just a few examples. There's some people on here, and hopefully there's some people watching it after who I'm friends with on Facebook, and they'll have seen a lot of these posts over the years. I find it therapeutic thinking about what I'm going to write. I've got some walks as well planned this year, and when I go out for a training walk, I spend a lot of time thinking about how to frame how I'm feeling, and more importantly, how the girls are feeling, what their health issues are at the time, what they're struggling with, and then I'll change it around. I'll put out a different post that might focus a little bit more on the progress that we're making in research and how things are moving there, because it is, if you think about it, pretty amazing that, you know, we're on the cusp of a condition disappearing for the next generation. You know, who wouldn't want to be part of that? And I get new parents all the time saying that to me. Who wouldn't want to be a part of doing this? And it's something I've been saying to people more and more recently because of these new parents who've really inspired me. Be part of something really special. The first neurological disorder to be cured. How good is that? So you've got to change your posts around. This was one when I was training for the London Marathon, and I was struggling, especially when I hit the shower after a run. It was worse than the run. And it's still happening because I've not got the nippies. So there's some on the way. This post got me, because sometimes I do like to look and see what posts have impact and what don't. This post got me quite a lot of donations. So putting silly things like that on can be quite beneficial. This was another one that was a little bit different. Me and a friend, we decided, because almost within a year of each other, Beth and Amber got some issues with the swallowing, and they had to have sort of mush food, pureed food. So we decided for October Awareness Month, we were going to do the same and have a pureed diet. Sounded like great fun, something different. 2.5 weeks in, I got very, very ill and had to give it up. And I still can't eat smashed avocado. I still struggle with mash because everything was mashed up and liquidized, and it was horrible. So I went to the doctor, and they looked at me like I was crazy, and I had to come off that diet. I don't recommend it to anyone. Gary carried on. He's an ex-rugby league player, and now he's a coach at Warrington Wolves, and he's used to pain, and he's from Cumbria, so there's not a lot going on up top. So he carried on. And I remember one night we went out for a meal with a friend of ours, and it was just after I'd stopped. So we had an Italian, and there was literally, like me, he's vegan, and there was literally nothing on the menu for him. And he sat there and drank 2 pints of lager and starved. So it was quite amusing. We had a good crack that night. But he got through the month, and then on the last day of it, he came to our house and we bought him a pizza, and he destroyed it in about 5 minutes. So that was a different challenge. That it seemed like a good idea at the time. It seemed like it wouldn't be that hard. It was horrible, and Rachel's on this workshop, so she can definitely back me up on that. And then this was a post from last year. This mural is near our office, our Reverse Rett office in Manchester city centre. And I kept looking at it, when I was going into work, and I just kept thinking, I have so many days where I wake up feeling like that, and I have to find a way of picking myself up, because I'm no use to anyone if my head's down and I'm not motivated. So I put this post out a couple of days before we did the Jurassic Coast Ultra 100K walk, and it got a lot of interaction and engagement with people. It's not easy to talk about what's going on with mental health. There's still a bit of a taboo. So putting something out like that about how, the struggles that I've had in the past and the strategies that I use to get through it now, I think it struck a chord with people who maybe felt something similar. And, if that helped someone, then that's great. So this slide I just popped in towards the end because there are a lot of people, especially parents of people with Rett syndrome, who can't do their own fundraising. They don't have time. Maybe they don't have the network. They don't have people who would sponsor them. They've got so much going on. It's overwhelming. I get that 100%. So when you're in that position, you can sometimes just stop for a minute and think, who do I actually know who could get on board with this and could help? So examples, schools are easy to get them to do a non-uniform day, especially if you've got a close connection to someone with Rett syndrome. Where if you work in an office or for a big company, dress down day, or even try and look into whether they do either match funding or choose a charity of the year. The company on the right, Alenta Space, who chose Reverse Rett as a charity of the year this year because of a little girl called Ola. and they've just donated their money that they raised, which was around just over £3,000. Do you know anyone who's got a shop? Do you know anyone who's got a cafe or a restaurant? Ask them if you can put a tin on the counter. Anything like that. Do you know anyone fairly famous who could tweet about reverse Rett? Who could share something on Instagram? Tweet isn't even the right word now, is it? I told you I knew nothing about technology. Something to do with X. Avoid at all costs, I say. What can you do? If you can't do any of that, if you don't know many people, because my connections are small. I don't know wealthy people. I couldn't get a table together to come to the London Gala or even a Manchester Gala. I have a lot of people on my Facebook who I've known for a long time, who, for all the reasons mentioned earlier, still support me. And I make the most of the connections that I do have. So people I've met through golf. I've got quite a close connection with Warrington Wolves, who've done calendars in the past and things like that. So I make the most of what I can do. Newspapers, your local newspaper will want to put a story about your child and your fundraising in it. It's very, very easy to get that done because they're always scraping around for stories. And if you read your local newspaper, you'll see exactly what I mean. It's like, it's the dullest thing on the planet, but your story could really brighten up that newspaper. So don't be afraid of getting in touch with the local press and get something out there. Anything like that. And if there's nothing else and you haven't got those connections, share things. Just share reverse Rett posts, share things that people that you know are doing, but always put a description. Don't just share a link. Remember, that's a key thing to take away from today. Don't just share links. It doesn't work. And then finally, before I hand over to two awesome people who are going to follow me, what can you do? I think I've just covered it, to be honest, but I just wanted to show you Josephine from a few years ago, who lay in that tin of beans for about 4 hours in I can't remember where it was, but it was in a town centre. I think that's still the maddest thing people have done. Someone has done for reverse Rett over the years. There's been a few crazy ones, but that's probably the maddest of all. So yeah, do anything at all. The madder, the better. So I hope some of that has been interesting. I could talk a lot longer and bore you to tears, but I'm always available if you want to ask questions. My email's everywhere, but it's andy@reverserett.org.uk. You can get in touch anytime. We can set up a phone call if you want to ask questions about how to do things. But for now, I'm just going to hand you over to two people who had a great 2023 of fundraising. Tanya White, whose daughter Layla was only diagnosed last March. It's obvious that she did a skydive. She's going to just talk a little bit about how she raised an incredible amount of money. And also Catherine Sim, who spoke earlier on, she's going to talk about, she took part in the Iceland trek with a group of women. When was it? Last September, October? Can't remember now, it's all a blur. And she raised money in a very, very different way. So she's going to talk a little bit about how she did that. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen and let Tanya take over. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Andy. Hello, everyone. I am Tanya, mother to Layla, who was actually diagnosed in May, not March. But yeah, very much her symptoms presented themselves a lot longer before. It was around about 10 months old she was. I think it was just after her 10-month review. I was discussing with my health visitor a lot of her difficulties and, well, severe developmental delay. She wasn't sitting, crawling, or bearing weight. And there was lots of other things going on as well. So she had stereotypies, lots of little quirks that she was doing. which, you know, was quite alarming, shuddering attacks and things like that. But yeah, the health visitor very much just said, well, she was premature, so let's go by her corrected age. And then months went by, and her corrected age, yeah, she still hadn't caught up. And of course, I started getting more and more worried. She then started with a childminder at 12 months old. And the childminder, we had sort of given her the heads up that she was really behind and that we'd spoken to the health visitor, and, you know, they weren't worried, but to keep an eye on it. But actually Layla's childminder at the time was quite concerned, and sort of said, look, don't let the health visitor fob you off, reach out to the right people. That kind of broke me a little bit, because I think once I'd heard from the health visitor that things were okay and not to worry too much and not to panic, I kind of went into a bit of a state of denial, and that was what I very much wanted to hear. So having the childminder sort of then flip it on its head was yeah, it was quite a tough time, but of course I needed to take action. So I then reached out to the health visitor again, and they got me in contact with the therapies team quite quickly, because she could see that I was very anxious. So Layla started with getting regular physiotherapy, speech and language therapy at 14 months old, so quite early actually. And that was really where the journey began, but it would take another 6 months before other things started during that time. Other things presented themselves. She started having seizures and things like that. So of course, health complications, we needed testing done, and I fought hard to get lots of tests done, and again was fobbed off by neurology. But yeah, October came along, October 2022, and finally we got the all-important appointment with her community paediatrician, who then we were heard by, and she ordered the full genome test that we had. And then, yeah, she was diagnosed May 2023, which was very, very difficult. And as Andy said earlier, it was a very traumatic time. But to be completely honest, I had come to the acceptance stage of Layla having a disability. I just didn't know what it was. So that's why, for me, I think I was able to fundraise quite soon, because, like I said, come to acceptance stage. And I just really, I think, as like Andy said, I needed to do it for my mental health. I'd left my job because my job was very stressful. And demanded a lot of hours, which I just could not put in because of Layla. So for me, I needed to do it, but also the more I was reading, the more research I was doing, it became like essential. I need to do it now, because of all, you know, the first Taysha announcement was like a month after Layla's diagnosis. So it was just like, well, okay, that's no time like the present. So yeah, and I think I first discovered reverse Rett through Rachel. So Rachel reached out to me, kindly answering a few of my questions, because I posted on the Rett UK forum on Facebook. You know, obviously I had a lot of questions, and yeah, I'd done a bit of research, but having, you know, Rachel reach out and actually then subsequently going on to have a lovely chat with Rachel and Andy via Zoom, which answered a hell of a lot more of our questions, was really, really helpful. So yeah, I think it was about 3 months into after Layla's diagnosis that I started my fundraiser. And of course, I wanted to do something very challenging. So because, you know, as Andy said, warriors go through a lot more. So I did a skydive. Well, I set up a skydive, and just want to say I had absolutely no idea where to start. No idea. I'd never done a fundraiser before, and it was all very, very new to me. So yeah, I had no idea what, target to set. But Andy very kindly helped me with just, the basics. And then once I set up a Just Giving page, it flowed from there, and I kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. So the main thing for me was the first part of it all of the journey was writing the story. So you write the sort of story on the Just Giving, but actually a couple of learnings from that from my side of things was not to go too in depth with everything in the story, because actually you can leave a lot of detail into your individual posts. So yeah, I scrutinized over the story quite a lot, and actually ended up going into the evening and taking loads out of it. I just didn't need to scrutinize that much. My sort of advice would be to break it down, and just into the vital points, and also make sure that you've got the sort of energy to do it. As I say, I definitely lost a lot of energy going into the night, and I found it quite emotional. So a safe space is, I think is important. Sorry, where are we? So yeah, once I'd written the story, sorry, I'm going too far ahead here. So yeah, emotional process. I would always start with something that's going to grab the reader's attention. So for me, the most, I just set my mind back to when we found out, and that was at the time a very poignant moment for me. So I was thinking about, how do I start this? How do I grab the reader's attention? Actually, let's just start from the very beginning of when we received that phone call. So I think I just started it on May, whatever date it was. At this time, I received this devastating phone call, and then sort of went into the rest of it there. As I say, keep it relevant, because I started going off on one in my story about neurology and how we'd been fobbed off by them, because that was something that was really I felt strongly about, but actually it just wasn't relevant to the reader. You need to talk about Layla's difficulties, or I had to talk about Layla's difficulties, and and how we want to raise funds for the charity that are going to eventually cure this disease. So I didn't need to write about neurology at that point. Actually, I then put that into a separate post on Facebook, to make it relevant to that post, which was actually saying about more specialized care with the SIP centre. So yeah, that was definitely something that I spent too long doing and didn't need to. And then, yeah, don't be afraid to set a high target if you're willing to put the effort into posting, because I set my target at £1,000 initially, and I made that in 24 hours, because my first post got a lot of attention. And actually, yes, so I would say definitely what Andy was saying about not just sharing the link, because that is actually what I did. So I just shared the link, which did have the photo, but it was the Just Giving page, rather than the extracted link and then a write-up and then a more engaging photo. But actually, because I'd not actually announced the news of Layla to a lot of people, it was only my close family and friends that knew. I think I did actually get quite a lot of interaction from that first post, just because a lot of people didn't actually know her story. They had no idea. But then going forward, I did notice that it wasn't getting the reach. So I would definitely say, go with what Andy said about extracting the link and then doing a nice write-up, and then a more engaging photo or photos, which is what I then went on to do. So I think I did 3 posts in my first week, because I got so much engagement from that first one. I was like, right, let's keep this ball rolling. So I then did a thank you post following, because I think that was quite important. And also I think it's really important to thank people, because, thinking about future fundraisers, it's nice to, thank people so that they know you're grateful as well. And then following that post, I sort of structured each post into breaking down Layla's symptoms. That was how I sort of found it much more manageable. And actually I knew exactly what I was going to post every week. So yeah, the first post I think I did in terms of her symptoms was about her mobility, which is probably the thing that affects Layla most. there's obviously lots of other things at the moment. You know, she's regressing and her hand use is, yeah, she's completely, more or less completely lost use of her hands. But at the time I was writing about exactly what was, you know, our journey and what and where we'd come in, up until that point. And yeah, mobility was the biggest thing at the time. So I got a hell of a lot of engagement from that post, lots of shares, and a lot of donations in that first week. In fact, I think the first sort of 3-4 weeks, I got lots of donations after every post. So yeah, don't be afraid of posting regularly, because I had that worry. I was like, am I going to annoy people? Absolutely not. You're telling your story and you're telling it in different ways. And that's exactly what I did. And also, like I say, it was very relevant. We had lots of, you know, current sort of medical breakthrough happening with the Tasha announcement. So people can literally see where the money's going, which was really important, you know, for each post to add that on the end, and make it relevant to what you're talking about as well, make it flow into it. So yeah, I posted once a week, I think, and yeah, I actually was going to post more than that, but I think having broken down Layla's symptoms, it fitted with once a week. Was, yeah, I could have done more, to be honest, because there's always more to talk about, and there's always thank you posts that you can do as well. And yeah, completely echoing what Andy said, people are forgetful. I actually know someone recently did a fundraiser, and she had about 3 months to fundraise, and she did 2 posts, and great for her. She raised the target that she wanted, but I know she could have raised more, because she literally did a post at the beginning and a post at the end. And actually, if people are forgetting, you've reminded them at the beginning, or you've posted at the beginning, some people are going to read that and go, great, I'll post later on. But if you've then only posted one more time, they might not be able to donate at that time for whatever reason. So consistent posting is really key. So always thank people individually. I found that quite challenging, because there was a lot of donations, so it's a lot of people to get through, but it's worth the time. It really, really is. And actually, one little thing that I did, and I think this was a little tip that Andy gave me as well, was to write on people's walls, like the old school way of messaging people, because actually their friends will see that, and then they might get curious, and then they may then go on to donate. And that actually did happen a couple of times. When I wrote on people's walls, I did notice donations from people that wouldn't have seen my post. They would have seen it on there, so it was like a family member or something. But also private messaging as well. As long as they're not anonymous, because there's a lot of anonymous ones, and again, those thank yous are key in doing a generalized thank you post, but also doing a thank you on the page, on the Just Giving page. I did a couple of them. So yeah, do take the time to do that. And like I say, it, I think, would help for future fundraisers, because people know that you really are grateful for the donations and them making a difference and actually making history. So where was I? I tagged reverse Rett in each of my posts, because I've actually had a lot of engagement from friends that have engaged with reverse Rett and actually follow reverse Rett now, so they can see the progress, all the announcements and progress that reverse Rett have made, and yeah, I just think it's nice to do that. And then yeah, end each post with something hopeful and informative. So yeah, I always talked about the gene therapy and the SIP centre, and just anything that you know, any sort of news, anything that had been done in the past, literal facts, you know, current information, so people can see that where the money goes. I think that's really important. And then yeah, I've put another thing here about getting people involved, because don't be afraid to do that. I had a couple of friends, really very kindly, one set up a raffle in the cafe, like Andy mentioned earlier, that happened. I didn't even approach her. She approached me and said, this is what we're thinking of doing. And I thought that was really, really kind. So it was like a wooden train rocker that was donated to her, and she did a raffle for someone to win it. And oh God, I actually forget how much was raised, but it was somewhere in the ballpark of about £200 just for that, which was amazing. I then had another friend, again, without me even prompting. So you can imagine if I had prompted people, probably would have got a lot more people involved. He set up, he sets up car meets. He's like a real petrol head, and yeah, does these like retro car meets, and was able to get some money through doing barbecues there. So people would pay for the barbecue, and then yeah, we made quite a bit from that. I think about £400, I think, in total. So yeah, that was really, really kind. And actually he's doing these car meets regularly, so we're still getting money, which is really just amazing. So yeah, just ask people, and I mean, give them sponsor forms. I mean, I think I gave a couple of people sponsor forms, and they just took them down to their local pub, and started talking about our story, which was again amazing. And don't be afraid to ask people to share your posts as well. I actually feel, as a learning from my side of things, I could have actually asked some people with different friendship groups to share, so I could have got more reach. I think I did maybe ask one person, had no response. But if you know, had I have actually asked a lot of people, then I would have got. I did get a lot of shares anyway. I was very lucky to have, you know, so many lovely people and family and friends sharing my posts quite consistently as well. So I was lucky in that respect. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask people to share. You know, what are they gonna? Most people will say that's no problem. And then yeah, I've sort of put a little point here about taking a break, because I did. I had a bit of a. I found it a bit overwhelming towards the middle of my journey, my fundraising journey, probably sort of week 4-ish, and I just needed to switch off from it. That was all. I actually spoke to Andy about it and said, look, you know, it's getting a little bit tough. You know, having to sort of share this. I'm not actually. I don't tend to share a lot of things on Facebook other than photos. I'm not like a regular poster. So it was a process for me. But I did very much find it very therapeutic. It was, you know, yeah, it was a good process. It was like journaling, but how I felt and everything. But yeah, I needed to take a break at one point because it was getting a bit too much. So yeah, don't be afraid to take a break. I think I just had about 10 days of just switching off from it and then getting back to it when I felt like I was ready to do so. I've put here about using other platforms. So I used Instagram not as much as Facebook because I don't have as many followers, and I don't get as much engagement with Instagram, to be honest, but it was totally worth it. I did about 3 posts in total, some stories, and I did get quite a lot of donations from that. Well, I say a lot, probably around 20 donations, I think, from just using Instagram. So it was time well spent. It really was. And actually, I got some donations on the back of my stories as well. And I think that's just 20 seconds of someone, you know, looking at your story. So it's worth the time. And I think towards the end, I did a reel, which I found incredibly stressful because it came at the time of us launching a family project. And yeah, which was 5 years in the making. So that was, it was kind of like all happening at once. And then my skydive was set for the next day. And I was doing the reel the day before because I was like, I want to get this last really emotive post. And that is the key word, making everything emotive. So I did a reel, and actually I used a song that just, I don't know how, but I managed to time the words of the song with parts of the video that was really just, yeah, very, very emotive. And I mean, it got me going and it got quite a few people going. And I think I got a lot of donations on the back of that. And that was the final week. So if I was still getting donations in that final week, then, you know, it's worth just taking the time to do those things. So yeah, finally, I just wanted to share how much was actually raised. So yeah, we've got the summary here, which was I think a total of 9,915, but we've got another 145 coming from the car meet, the recent car meet, which has taken us to over £10,000. and that is double my target. That is double my target. So if I can do it, and I had no idea what I was doing to begin with, so can you. The sky really is the limit. And that's it.
Thanks for that, Tanya. I'd like to thank you as well for sharing the bullet points from Facebook, because I've actually got I've got 3 pages here of stuff that I've written that I didn't mention when I was talking. I just went off like I tend to do and just did my own thing. So
yeah, I think I've actually missed
written down on yours.
I was going to say, I think I've actually missed a point that one point that I didn't put down on those bullet points I did really want to say was try not to ramble like I did in my final post when I did the skydive, because I just was rambling about how I looked in the video, which didn't need to be put in there. I've actually amended that post since. But yeah, people don't care how you look. They just care about the fact that you've done it. So yeah, don't ramble about insignificant details. But yeah. Yeah, I hope that helps. I hope that helps everyone.
Brilliant. That was really good. Thank you.
No problem.
I did write this this information for a group that are doing the Jurassic Coast walk, which I did last year, and I'm doing it again with them. And I sent it out to them all. So I'm just going to do a little bit of editing on it, and then when we send the video out, I'm going to send it out to everybody, just so you can see, you can get some of these ideas to make it easier on social media. So over to you, Catherine.
Okay, so no pressure then. So hello, everybody. My story is kind of quite different in the way that I fundraised. So the first thing is I don't live in England. I actually live in Spain full time. And just to let you know, it's only 9 degrees over here. So I'm feeling your England pain at the moment with the temperature. So my story starts, I'll just share my screen. This is Georgina, and this is one of my other daughters. Georgina is one of 4 girls. Georgina's 28 and was diagnosed with Rett syndrome when she was just 5, so quite late in some terms, but it was not long after the actual test to find Rett syndrome came about that we were going through the process of the paediatrics and what have you. Fast forward 28 years, and I have a very good friend who works for Reverse Rett, who rings me occasionally and says, do you fancy doing? And that's how you find yourself cycling 5K every day for 50 days and things like that. So this time with the Iceland challenge, because I don't live in England, I don't have a massive social network, quite an insular and grumpy old lady, in all fairness. I quite like just living my own life. When I signed up to do the Iceland trek, I was worried about the Iceland trek because I'm also in love my sofa, so I'm not very good at training. It was, how would I raise the money? I don't have a big social network in Spain, but I do have a very dear friend. And when I told her about the challenge, she was like, right, we'll do it together. So she was my training partner every day, but she also helped me set up how I raised my money. So we had a brainstorming session and we thought about all the different ways that we could raise money. And we narrowed it down to, we had a quiz. I did a quiz night, which was, or it was actually a quiz afternoon. And that was a bingo quiz afternoon. So we just contacted a local restaurant. We made some quite good links with another organisation over here, which is the U3A, which stands for the Universal Third Age. And it's a charitable organisation that puts on events. They do all sorts of stuff. It's actually quite interesting once I got to know them all, but they do a lot of social fundraising. So we accessed their membership, really, lots of old folks during the day without a lot to do, who are always keen to turn up for a meal and a game of bingo. So that was one of the events that we did. We also did a line dancing social, and it was quite funny because it was actually, there's the poster for the line dancing. Let me just move that over. There's the social, the poster for the line dancing social that was made for us. It was 38 degrees at 9 o'clock at night, as we were all do-si-doing our way across the back of a restaurant, back of a bar. It was all covered. It was absolutely roasting. But we still made, I think we made about 400 euros. And considering half the people who said they were coming didn't come because it was nearly 40 degrees, we were really pleased with that. We also did things like tabletop sales. So the first one we did, I had an old teddy bear that my husband bought for me 20 years ago, that we did a guess the name of the bear. And we then also had a guess the weight of the sweets. So we had a Kilner jar, filled it with sweets, and people had to guess the weight. We did a tombola at another event. And we had Sue, who was my training partner. Her husband made us one of those things that you used to get at the old fairs, the electric wire, where you it buzzes if you touch the wire. And that was pennies to make that, but that's quite a lot of money. People loved having to go. It was old school. The other thing that we did was we have a supermarket over here called the Overseas Supermarket, which is it was Iceland, but it doesn't belong to Iceland, but it's all Iceland products. So I contacted them and asked them about bag packing. So 2 Saturdays, not long before we actually went to the challenge, a friend, again, Sue, and I stood in Iceland for 6 hours packing bags, and we had a bucket on the end of the conveyor belt, and we just packed bags and asked people for donations. The other thing that I found actually really brilliant about doing all of this, because they were very community based, they were very social, it was lots of face-to-face interactions, was about spreading the awareness of Rett syndrome. And again, I had somebody say to me, oh, I know somebody with Tourette's. So, that does happen quite a lot. But I also met a lady whose granddaughter had Rett syndrome, and she'd never met anybody else. So it was really nice. I could introduce her to my mum, because my parents live in Spain here as well. And that's now formed a new friendship of kind of grandparent support. So very little of my fundraising actually came from social media, because I'm rubbish at it. Even though Andy does tell me the right things to do, I then do it wrong. And I just don't have a big social network on social media. So my target for Iceland was 2,000, and I raised nearly 3, and probably 85% of that came from face-to-face interactions. I was thinking about going around where I live with a pen and paper, but my Spanish isn't good enough, and nor is my German or my Belgian or my Dutch. So language is a barrier over here. But thankfully, the Overseas Supermarket was brilliant. That was a really good. So if you have a local supermarket to you that will let you go in a backpack, I probably raised over 1,000 euros over the 2 weekends doing that. Good shoes is also a key if you're doing things like that, because you're on your feet all the time. And that was how I raised my money for Iceland, for the Iceland challenge. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Catherine. 2 completely different ways of doing it, but both really successful. And like I said earlier on, it doesn't matter what you do. If you do something, if you raise something, it's making a difference for our children. One thing I should say is, not everybody's a parent on the call, and people who are watching it who aren't parents. It's easier to raise money if you're a parent, because you can share so much more. You can share more photos and be very intimate. But I do know parents who have a lot of friends who fundraise but don't fundraise themselves, and they're very open with letting them have, photographs and things like that. So it is good if you are an uncle, an auntie, a friend, if you can get permission from the parents to, allow them to use a photograph. it will make a difference. And if all else fails, you can use some of my girls, because I don't mind them being shared everywhere. So does anybody have any questions?
We've got one question. Mike has asked, is Tanya's fundraising page still active? And would she be happy to share the link?
Yes, it is. And yes, I can. No problem.
Okay, we'll put that
Brilliant.
in the email.
Cheers, Mike. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mike's actually in the process of organising a walk, Cross Bay Walk in. Where does it start, Mike? Does it start in the Lake District?
It starts at Arnside and goes across to Grange over Sands.
Excellent.
13th of July. We've got 13 confirmed places in terms with the organisers. I mean, they can facilitate 500 on a day, which is pretty impressive. But we've certainly got 30, and I think I've got signed up to 9 so far, and I haven't even printed off the application form for them yet. So if you'd like to join in, we'd be very happy to see you. 13th of July, a Saturday. The sun will shine.
Let's hope so. Gareth has also asked. Sorry, Gareth has asked about the new T-shirts with the new logo. Yes, Gareth, they are coming. They're on order, and new T-shirts will be issued for anyone undertaking a challenge.
Fabulous, thank you very much.
If you need something, if you email Evelina at Reverse Rett, or email me, it's Catherine at Reverse Rett, and we'll sort something out for you. Let us know sizes.
Will do. Thank you very much.
And if anybody wants anything now, we've still got some of the old logo retro Reverse Rett T-shirts if anyone needs any. But I don't think there's a problem using the old ones, because I think it's like old football kits. You know, I've got loads of Warrington Wolves and Liverpool tops with the old logo on and all the rest of it. So
mine have all just seen better days.
Yeah, well, you get a lot of wear out of them, don't you? Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I've really enjoyed it, to be honest. I went way off track, so I'm sorry about that. But hopefully you've got something out of it. And as I said earlier, get in touch anytime if there's anything you want to ask or you need anything. Or it doesn't have to, and remember as well, it doesn't have to be fundraising related. You know, our 2 girls are 28 and 23. So if you've got an issue with Rett syndrome, anything you want to ask about, anything to do with Rett syndrome, don't think you have to raise money to ask it. Just get in touch. We're parents at the end of the day. That's our number one role, is being a parent. And we just want to, you know, if we can help you, we want to help you. And apart from that, I think that's everything. Final piece of advice, just keep looking left. Don't look right. There's lots of them there, just ignore them. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you all.
Cheers all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.